Hi, y'all. It's Bridget Cutshaw with Real Things Living. Today, my guest is Neil Markey. He is the co-founder and CEO of Beckley Retreats, and he's based on his military background. He's now into integrative health programs. Can you say hi, Neil?
Hello. Thank you for having me, Bridget.
I appreciate you taking the time, and I really enjoy talking to, I should say enjoy, but people who've dealt with issues in their life. And my first question is, what prompted you to take the integrative health route? Because I know you were in the military, and that was probably very stressful.
Yeah, I joined the service after 9/11. I did the officer program at University of Maryland, and then went in as a lieutenant and went to Iraq once and Afghanistan twice, and got out and went to graduate school, and was having a lot of different symptoms, trouble sleeping, challenges in my relationships, basically constant state of this fight or flight or sympathetic dominant state where it's hard for your body to rest, and then it's hard for your body to it's hard to, you don't feel well because you're exhausted. And I tried a bunch of different traditional approaches, different pharmaceutical approaches, SSRIs and anti-anxiety medications, and I didn't find a whole lot of benefit with them. And then I got introduced to meditation through a friend at grad school, and that actually ended up being quite helpful. And that kind of started this journey for me that has now led to, I think, a better understanding of some of these more holistic approaches. And it's a real honor and a privilege to get to, be part of this new industry that's growing with the use of psychedelics, and hopefully getting them to more people safely and mindfully.
Right. You got to have a little guidance to understand it a little bit. And I think that's what your organization is about, because I don't know, I know enough about it to be dangerous. I mean, I understand the meditation part that is so critical. And from my experience too, it's also the holistic integrated part is what you're eating too.
Yeah, definitely.
Body. And that is something.
And what you're not putting in your body.
Right. Every person's body is different. Our DNA is different. Our perspective's different. And I think it's good that you saw that. Unfortunately, you had to deal with all that stress from being in the military. And at least you acknowledged it and tried different things. And you're sharing your story of what's working. That's what people want to hear. And
thank you for that.
Yeah, where is your company based out of? Is it in?
We're a US-based company, but our programs are in Jamaica and the Netherlands, because it's the two places where we can use these psilocybin mushrooms completely legally.
Okay.
We're starting to be able to do these programs in the United States, and Oregon and Colorado have passed state level laws, but it's still, unfortunately, federally illegal to do that work. So we feel more comfortable doing it in places where it's federally legal from a U.S. perspective and locally legal.
Right.
And yeah, but easy flights from the U.S.
That's what I figured as well. It just, because you got to be so careful for some reason. I guess the medical industry has a lot to do with some of these laws that we haven't. Is that right?
Sure. Yeah. It's not unique to medicine, but big industry has a lot of hold on the whole system, from the education system to the political system, right? And there's a lot of resources that these organizations have, and they use it very strategically to protect their financial interests. And so we really shouldn't be surprised at that, but it does create some real challenges.
Correct. And I know that we're, at least in some states, I mean, we're not talking about the mushrooms, but like marijuana, that is changing in every state. And I think it's just very complicated. I think that's what scares people. I should say scares, but that's kind of why I think we should look at options, especially for your well-being, because never had much help. Like I think you had mentioned before we got on the call, taking some certain medications didn't really help you long term. You
Yeah.
had, and that's why you have to look at options. And so what do you think, you mentioned the mushrooms, what are the benefits and risks of them?
Yeah, well, first off, um, mushrooms have been around for hundreds of millions of years, right? They're a fungus, which is different than a plant. Um, and they've been used for many thousands of years all over the world. If you look at recorded history and when they've done archaeological digs, they can find remnants of these psilocybin psychedelic compounds. So they've been in our culture for quite some time. And there's actually some cultures that are, around today, like the Huichol in Mexico, that you can trace their lineage back thousands of years, and they've been using these plants for as far back as we can go. So they're not a new thing. There's just this kind of new interest in them, and the benefits are there's many potential benefits. The psilocybin compound looks to be neuroregenerative, so it helps create new uh, um, connections in the brain or repair old bad connections in the brain. If you look at the brain when someone is taking these mushrooms on an fMRI versus when they're not, parts of the brain that don't usually communicate are communicating. So you can think it in some ways, maybe it's helping the brain function at its most optimal level. And then, we don't understand the mechanics super well of, we don't understand the mechanics of most medicine super well. It's all theory, and everybody's so different. But what people report after having these experiences is that they feel lighter, they feel more connected. Many times things will come from their history, like early childhood trauma or stuff that's happened in their life. And through the experience, if it's conducted in the right way, they can kind of reprocess it. And so then it's not as deep in them anymore. And so people generally, even if they're kind of on the clinical end of the spectrum, will, like treatment resistant depression or PTSD, not everyone, but many people will move towards more stable and well. And stable and well people oftentimes will move towards even a higher order of creativity and empathy and connectedness. And so they're really fascinating. Now, like you said, they're not without risks, and I think that, we get ourselves in trouble if we overestimate the benefits and underestimate the risks. And so they're like everything, there's a cost benefit. And so people need to be aware of that as well. And some of the risks with psilocybin, I mean, the number one probably is taking too much and doing it in the wrong environment, because your world is going to shift, and that can be incredibly destabilizing and scary if it's not done with people that know what they're doing. Also, some people with known psychiatric conditions like bipolar or schizophrenia are generally recommended not to use these compounds. Now, there are some researchers that are challenging that and saying, yes, there's risk there, but there's potential. It just needs to be done in a very, very controlled, particular way. But people that have those markers in their history or have been diagnosed with those need to proceed with extra caution. And then, there's also, it's actually quite common, 30% of individuals will have what we call a challenging experience. So it won't necessarily be pleasant. But the majority of those individuals will say it was worth it. So it's just important for people to kind of be eyes wide open around the potential ups and downs. But I think, at least for me and many others, I think if you do the risk comparison to many other pharmaceuticals you might get from your doctor, or alcohol, or many other kind of high risk activities or medium risk activities that we do in our regular lives, this is a pretty, easy decision to explore, if that makes sense.
Right. And that's kind of what I was saying. I think if you're new to this, you need to have some support, like with your organization, to make sure, right, you're doing it properly. I would probably fall asleep. I think I'm just one of those people. I'm sensitive to. I can't even drink alcohol. I'll go. I'll just. I mean, I'm just one of those. I should say sensitive, but I have a metabolism. I have high metabolism already. And I think today, if I was a kid, I'm just kind of jumping. I would probably said I had ADHD or something because I've just always been a little bit hyper. And does it help people with that? Um,
With ADHD?
yeah, I don't know
Yeah.
why that's a term. They label people with that. I don't know if that's the proper thing to do.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm not super familiar with the ADHD research. I don't think we have like a large body of it, but
I'm s-
there's definitely people out there that are doing it, that are starting to do it, but we don't have
okay.
conclusive outcomes. But it does look like generally these experiences done in a controlled environment bring people back towards more of an equilibrium. So
Ah, right.
there's this reason to believe that they could potentially have like a pretty broad use case. And what we do know about them is they do create this openness, this neuroplasticity. So there's this increased potentiality for change after the experience for some period of time, weeks, maybe a couple months. And in that time, the individual is more malleable. So with the help of a therapist or trained professional, you can do a lot more work potentially, right? So all of the other therapies that we know of, there's reason to believe might be enhanced by the proper use of psychedelics. And that a lot of that research is happening now too.
I've I've noticed there's definitely a lot more people that are into helping as a psychologist and things like that, and that's probably part of our because they're trying to deal with this ADA, I should say ADHD, but just PTSD, everything. I don't know. I'm not too comfortable labeling. Um, is that the right word? Labeling stuff, but what do you think is that the future of healthcare with this kind of medicine and spirituality? Because there's so many, I've just seen so many people get into the psychology field as a
Yeah. Well, I think it's gonna it's happening through the medical system. So there's companies that are taking these compounds through the normal FDA clinical trial pathways. And so you'll have mushrooms and MDMA and other ones. Ibogaine is going to be all over the news this year for sure because it looks to be incredibly helpful for alcohol use disorder and opioid use disorder, two massive problems in our country. And so you'll have doctors able to prescribe different psychedelic compounds for different clinical indications. And in some cases, insurance will cover it just like a normal drug. What I'm also hopeful of is that there's also a more preventative health,
yeah,
well-being side of the equation where you don't need to wait until someone develops some of these chronic or chronic conditions to do any intervention. You can get people earlier, teach them how to take better care of themselves with the proper use of these plants. You really can get people's attention, and I think you can have higher acceptance rates of all these different well-being practices that are really hard to get people to adopt. And then, you reduce a lot of that need for the really expensive stuff and the really challenging stuff down the road with the simple basic stuff like meditation and time in nature and healthy diet and just good habits, just like mindful living.
exactly. Before we got on the call, I told Neil that I had cancer experiences, and to help myself heal, I did become I wanted to understand the nutrition, and I asked a lot of questions, and it helped me. I found a holistic epidemiologist who was open to looking at things differently, looking at the cause and not the symptoms, right? And I found that I am allergic to dairy, Neil.
Right.
So I'm
It's
eating,
yeah,
it's gonna
similar for
affect
me.
my immune system is too busy fighting off cheese. And then cancer's like, hey, I won't curse, but that's kind of joke. I call it. I have to make jokes about it, and that's why when I felt better, I didn't know. And I think just from my personal opinion, in countries, they have their dairy differently. Like I can eat the dairy in France, but I have problems with the dairy in the United States. I'm sure I'm not the only person. who has this issue. But I'm glad that you guys are doing this because we need options. There's just, from my experience, and I'm a patient advocate as well. So we need to have that empathy. And I think what you're doing, these retreats and meditation, you're helping reduce the empathy dilemma. Is that the right word we got going on?
That works. I mean, for sure. If nothing else, these programs, when done appropriately, and these compounds, when used appropriately, improve empathy. They knock the rough edges off people. They get us out of our mind and this constant state of criticism and judgment and making sense of, and just this mode that most of us are very used to being in because of the way we live these days, and more into the heart and the body. And then it's a whole different experience with yourself, nature, other human beings. And we need to be able to have a balance of, both. You need to be able to use your mind when it's appropriate, and you need to be able to feel when you need to be able to feel.
That's so true. It's just something that, as you're talking, made me think of the aspect of AI, how that's going to affect the wellness. I'm just curious what your thoughts are on that. I wanted people to use it ethically, that's for sure. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I would say my thoughts are evolving because it's kind of hard to keep up. I think I was more of like a purist a couple years ago, and was like, no technology, kind of keep it away. And now, I don't know, I've seen some of these chat tools, and I think so long as we don't forget that really what we need is connection with, ourself, other human beings, and nature.
Right.
Like that's what we need to, that needs to ultimately be the redirection. Then if the technology is helping people get there, if the AI is reminding you to go on a nature walk, great. If AI is like taking some things off your plate so that you can have more time to meditate, great. But if we're just like all going into the matrix more and just interacting with technology directly and forgetting about this world, I'm a bit worried about that. But boy, it's going to be an adventure for these next 10 years for sure.
I read an article about how like the Apple Watch they have, it's got me trained. I mean, I've always been a long-term runner. I mean, I've been a runner for over 40 years, but it says, Bridget, or get up, because we're sitting in front of computers a lot, especially now with Zoom calls. It reminds me to stand, right?
Yeah.
And that's just the only thing I like to use it for. And it does, I don't obsess over how many steps I'm doing, but I like it to remind me to stand. And
yeah,
that's really how and I understand they're also using AI with research on the healthcare aspect for cancer and things like that.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. I mean, just imagine when they're able to create drugs that are hyper specific for someone's unique condition and DNA and metabolism, that's all coming. So it's going to be,
and
it's going to be really, it's exciting.
And I think it's part of it. My holistic epidemiologist, I think because he did all that for me, right? Because the regular doctors are pushing medicine. Like, here, you just need to chill. No, why am I hurting? It's kind of why and so I found this chiropractor who recommended, and it was my husband that recommended a chiropractor to me. And anyway, I thought it was kind of funny that he did that. But then I found all this asking questions. I think the holistic side, Neil, is having a positive impact on the regular medical field, and that they're seeing that it is helping other people.
Yeah. I'm not sure your thoughts on Reiki, like energy medicine. For some, that's still a little edgy. But there was a New York Times article a year ago that I always will never forget the headline. That was, there's no scientific reason why Reiki works. So why does it? And this idea that there's also these techniques and traditions and ways that we've completely forgotten about that are incredibly impactful. We just got to remember that they're hard to monetize, and so you might not see them as much. And so, but that doesn't mean that they're not beneficial, and that doesn't mean that you shouldn't do them. Meditation's a great example. I mean, there's just not a lot of money to make in meditation, so you shouldn't expect your doctor to start with that, just because that's the way the system is, you know?
Just learned it. Right. One thing I learned after my cancer, I had it twice. They were now using acupuncture now, which I think is cool. In the chemo section, I think that's an example how they're integrating. So I was really
Yeah.
happy that they're doing that, and I didn't need it, but it just depends on. I didn't need that extreme treatment some of those people were having, but it's really helpful what you're sharing. I guess the one last question I have for you is, what do you think? Two or three takeaways of the secrets to being well, and at the moment, right?
Yeah, I think meditation's foundational for me. You know, everybody's different, but I think that's a very important one because it all kind of starts there. And then healthy diet and good time in nature. And I'll add a fourth, which is good connections, good friends, good family, good work.
I really appreciate what you're doing, and we're really on the same page because we've had experiences not the same, but we had integrated this type of living into our life, and it made a big impact. And we're still here, right?
We're still here.
Trying to make an impact. So where can people learn more about you, Neil?
If they Google Beckley Retreats, we come up. We're part of this broader Beckley ecosystem that started with the Beckley Foundation and this really iconic woman by the name of Amanda Fielding that maybe if we connect another time, we can talk more about. But yeah, it's just Beckley Retreats, and we'll come up, and we're happy to do one-on-one calls, and we're super responsive through email. So just reach out.
I love that. And for those that are listening, I will include the link in the description. And you're very, very positive, and I love that. And I really appreciate the time, and we do need to schedule a longer call next time.
Let's do it. Thank you, Bridget.
Bye.